მოგესალმებით, მე გახლავართ სალომე ასათიანი, რადიო თავისუფლების კორესპონდენტი. გესალმებით ბაზალეთიდან, სადაც ბიოლის ფონდის სამხრეთ კავკასიური ბიუროს ორგანიზებით მიმდინარეობს საზაფხულო სკოლა, მწვანე აკადემია, რომელსაც წელს განსაკუთრებული პატივი ერგო ჩვენ სტუმრებს შორისაა კლაუს ოფე, პოლიტიკის სოციოლოგი, ჩვენი დროის ერთ-ერთი ყველაზე მნიშვნელოვანი მემარცხენე ორიენტაციის მოაზროვნე, ჰერტის მმართველობის სკოლის ემერიტუს-პროფესორი, რომელიც სხვადასხვა დროს მუშაობდა ბერლინის ჰუმბოლდტის უნივერსიტეტში, სტენფორდის, პრინსტონის, ჰარვარდის, კალიფორნიის უნივერსიტეტებში, კლაუს ოფე ერთ დროს იურგენ ჰაბერმასის მოწაფეც იყო და მას ბევრი განიხილავს მე-20 საუკუნის დასავლური აზრის ერთ-ერთი ფუნდამენტური მიმდინარეობის ფრანკფურტის სკოლის მეორე თაობის წარმომადგენლად. კლაუს ოფეს კვლევის სფეროები და სამეცნიერო ნაშრომები ძალიან მასშტაბურია, მათი ჩამოთვლა შორს აგვიყვანს. ზოგადად თუ ვიტყვით, ის იკვლევს დაძაბულ და პრობლემურ ურთიერთმიმართებას დემოკრატიასა და კაპიტალიზმს შორის, არის ასევე კეთილდღეობის სახელმწიფოს სპეციალისტი, ევროკავშირის სოციო-ეკონომიკური ბაზისის ანალიტიკოსი და ბოლო პერიოდში ბევრს მუშაობს ეგრეთ წოდებული გარდამავალ ეტაპზე, დემოკრატიისკენ გარდამავალ ეტაპზე, ეგრეთ წოდებულ ტრანზიციის ფაზაში მყოფი სახელმწიფოების ეკონომიკის კვლევის თვალსაზრისით. ჩვენ ძალიან გვახარებს ის, რომ დატვირთული დღეების და გრაფიკის მიუხედავად ბატონი ოფე დაგვთანხმდა ინტერვიუზე და დღეს ვეცდებით რამდენიმე კითხვა დავუსვათ, რამდენადაც შევძლებთ გაგაცნოთ მისი ნაზრები. Good evening, Mr.
Good
Offe.
evening.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us
My
after
pleasure.
such a busy schedule and so many dense and wonderful lectures you've given us.
Thank you.
Before we go into more specific topics, I can't help not to ask you about the continuing legacy or the pertinence or importance of the Frankfurt School thinkers, since you are seen as associated with this school of thought as a later generation. 70 years ago, as we all know, thinkers from this school, Adorno and Horkheimer and many others, put forward a dire warning that capitalism would entail a cultural apocalypse, manipulating mass society into passivity, compliance, and so on and so forth. What would these thinkers, you think, say today? Did their prediction come true? And what are the more pertinent questions the critical theory has to ask and answer in today's day and age?
Wow, this is not an easy topic and not easily answered in 3 or 4 sentences. The historical situation of the Frankfurt School, to which I belong in a very limited sense. I would not describe myself as a disciple of this school. Anyway, the historical situation that leftist intellectuals found themselves in the 20s and early 30s before the rule of National Socialism in Germany is the following. They wondered why capitalism seemed so durable. And the answer they came up with is it has to do with what they called cultural industry. What happens in families, in the media, in radio in particular, but also in printed media, was seen as stultifying, misleading. We are in a new age, and the concept of cultural industry has so obvious applications in our present day that we still don't know what it is that leads people to miss their political opportunities.
But to go back to what we were discussing, this fear of pop hegemony, that really superficial, yes, vulgar celebrities would dominate globally, yes, media, culture, and our collective imaginaries to some extent, and perversely so, that has come true in the world of politics, because now, as many would say, we do have a pop celebrity, a TV celebrity as the President of the United States. Yes. A brand,
yes,
someone who became popular through his own television shows, absolutely, and networks. So what does this tell us about the current?
Yeah, that is a new mode of communication which follows one principle. The principle is the principle of eliminate intermediaries, the celebration of directness. So the president, the American president, is very interested to the point of blatant, obvious lies in maximizing the audience of his events, right? Including the inauguration, when he said, never were so many people. It's clear that this is not the case. He wants people to be present and admire him and cheer for him. At the same time, he does not use the media. He hates the official media. He uses Twitter. He uses Twitter in order to get a direct. So that means a lot for political life, and because political life in liberal democracies depends upon intermediaries, representatives. And one is reminded of one famous line of the British political philosopher, conservative philosopher, but still a very important voice. He said, I, your representative, he was a politician of the citizen of Bristol, right? As your representative, I owe you my judgment, and that is why you voted for me. I do not owe you the repetition of your sentiments, right? My reasoned judgment, and that takes place in representative bodies, rather than at the mass level where irresponsible people, like in the Brexit referendum.
What is it that is happening nowadays? There is a lot of talk about the Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, of course, fueled it to the greatest degree, but these concerns have been around for many years, looking at Hungary, looking at Poland, looking at France. Populist forces are on the rise.
Yes.
Liberal democratic consensus that has been in place since the Second World War is on the verge of collapse. What is happening in terms of ideological, cultural? That is
the question that we all try to answer. Well, people rightly feel that nations and nation states and the policies they can do are insufficient. And at the same time, the supranational establishments, such as the European Central Bank or NATO or the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, are unable to do something about it. So I think what is right in Nancy's analysis is that the nation state fails, but supranational institutions also fail.
Is it because they only adhere to this one model of development, such as deregulation, privatization?
Well, that is. I think we should think of neoliberalism as a matter of the past, and that the populist movement can be read as a counter movement. And my view of the situation is the following. The elephant in the room, the fact that no one talks about, but it is all important, is the decline of traditional forms of social democracy. Social democrats used to believe in the state institutions, state regulation, state intervention, and so on. No one does this anymore. That has fallen victim to the neoliberal revolution that set in with Thatcher and Reagan in the early. So everything is to be left to the market. But this does also not lead to acceptable conditions of employment, of predictability, of security, and so on. Therefore, the new institution that attracts hopes and appeals to the needs of people is not state power, but state borders. The new wave of rightist populism thrives on the insight that borders are a mechanism to keep us safe by keeping everything that is foreign out. Foreign powers like Brussels, foreign goods like foreign investors, the European Central Bank, migrants, foreign religion, foreign goods and foreign gods, I say, right?
I would like to focus on one of your recent books, Europe Entrapped, in which you seem to be putting forward an actual solution, but at the same time you say that this solution is so unpopular that it can never win voter support in the northern part of Europe.
My approach and my perspective is something like the following. Given the interconnectedness and the long-term causation from one European member state to the other, migration, what the economists call chains of value creation. Every single product is multinational, and national borders should be permeable in order to facilitate this international division of labor. That is irreversible anyway. If that is the case, then we should also be able to internationalize policies and move more of national sovereignty to the European level. The condition for that is that people feel represented at the European level. That is, the democratic element is missing so far at the European level of a supranational agency of policy making. And one policy area that I focus on in particular, as I have taught this for many years and researched on this, is the area of social and labor market policies. And this is still the preserve of member states in the EU, but it must be moved up one level.
And would you say capital would agree to that?
Capital is not opposed to this. Nationalist political forces within the member states are for. Why should we pay for them, right? That is a political...
Germany paying for Greece, for example.
Absolutely. And you can win elections with this rhetorical question. But it is not, if Germany had paid for Greece 7 years ago, we would be in a much better situation, and the costs of the Greek crisis would be much more bearable, both for the Greeks and for the Germans and everyone else. It is also the demand that Greece must service its debt is, ill-informed demagogic propaganda. Greece, in its present situation, is entirely unable to service its debt. The debt must be forgiven. The horizon must be widened. People must be told that sovereignty must be moved one level up to the European Union. But what people rightly demand is that we need more than technocracy. We need a credible form of political representation at the European level. And I think what Macron is proposing and what other people in French policy intellectuals are proposing, a Eurozone parliament and a European finance minister with the right, and that defines the state, with the right to tax and borrow and spend, right? Across the entire Eurozone, right? And that could be done outside of the Lisbon Treaty and is legally and hopefully politically not as big as a problem. And I see that this is going to happen over the next few years, hopefully. I mean, that's sort of an optimistic statement, but I think Europe can take care of Europe rather than of the individual member states that are deeply divided, and I could not emphasize this more, both along a north-south axis and an east-west axis, namely that still remains on the issue of migration and the absorption of migrants, a terrible divide, and both of these divides, the economic divide and the xenophobic divide, I would say, need to be overcome by European institutions. There is no way.
To go a little bit beyond European borders and to address locations such as this one, where we are now.
Right, yes.
In the morning we heard your wonderful lecture entitled World Capitalist Economy System and the Fate of Democracy in the Third World. Now Georgia, of course, is formerly a member of the Second World, modernizing entity, which was even rivaling the West.
Soviet Union, yeah.
Soviet Union, but as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, Georgia, being one of the most prosperous member states of Soviet Union, fell into dire poverty, into everything collapsed.
Yeah, everything.
Why do you think that happened? And could they have done it somehow differently? The ones.
Well, that is very. This is my first visit to your wonderful country, the history of which I have read about in the last few weeks a bit. I realized, and I was not fully aware of the fact that you had a real civil war after the breakdown, and also the territorial situation.
And the fourth one recently. We had
right, and military action, violence, mass protests, discontinuity in government, also in constitution, and so a turbulent time. I mean, I realize how hard it must have been to find a strategic direction, and hopefully that time is now behind you. I mean, Georgia is in a situation where international treaties and international organizations are comparatively absent, right? I mean, the Soviet Union is a matter of the past. NATO is out of the question, or it seems like for now, given the signals sent by Putin, EU is for now out of the question, and the EU has so many difficulties that it cannot even deal constructively for the moment with Western Balkans. National economy of the country lacks perspective for export, for attractive foreign direct investment.
Something similar occurred here in the 2000s that had already taken place in former Eastern European, former state socialist countries, namely that the political and intellectual elites started to get fascinated with the ideas of neoliberal ideology, so to say.
Right, yeah.
With Thatcher, with Reagan. GDP has grown after the previous government, but the gap between the rich and poor remains vast.
Right.
Majority of population still lives in poverty. Every fifth child lives beyond the poverty line. So to ask you maybe this way, what role do you think a state should play in countries like Georgia? What can it do anything to overcome this peripheral situation?
I mean, state capacity or the strength of a state is all important, and what you need for a strong democratic state is responsiveness to the demands and needs of the population. you need rule of law, and you need a capacity of the state to extract resources, that means taxes, and implement the law in a corruption-free manner, right? That I think is for beginners, a complete definition of what we mean by a democratic state. Once you have such an institution in place and a fair competition of political parties, then I think a slow process of economic recovery and improvement can start. And poverty is, let me just say, that poverty should be a priority. People can be as rich as they want, as long as nobody is poor, right?
But that should be done through taxation.
Yes, sure.
I believe you've heard the situation in Georgia where in order to change or modify tax policy, you have to call for a referendum. That was the cause put in the constitution by the previous government.
Unbelievable. And I mean, taxation, state revenues come from different sources. One is public enterprises. One is social security contributions. One is consumption taxes or sales taxes. One is corporate taxation. One is income. So I could not believe when I first learned that progressive taxation, which is a very conventional means of tax policy and public finance in most countries that I am aware of, is banned by the constitution. That is hard to swallow and to understand, but I'm sure even the constitution can be changed in this point, and the Constitutional Court may have different views.
Because people still believe that trickle-down economy.
No, okay, that is a false theory. Trickle-down does not work, and the wealth of the rich does not arrive where it is most needed.
So the final point, to make it very clear for our viewers, even poor countries such as Georgia should have progressive taxation. That would be your...
I mean, I thought this is an iron, it is an iron law that they have. But I was not fully convinced. I mean, we have in some peripheral European EU member states, such as Bulgaria, we have a very low taxation, and we have a flat rate taxation, 10% corporate. So I thought, how can this be? And the answer is, well, that attracts foreign direct investments because they can live so cheaply. It doesn't, because foreign direct investment depends on other things, the availability of a trained labor force and rule of law, and this, to the same extent or even more than on taxation. So, but taxation is all important for the governing capacity of the state. I mean, policies are expensive, and the state must be able to spend on policies without going in disproportionate debt. And a state is a state only if it can do this, perform this, execute policies, and respond by these policies to the demands of the people. There's no other way.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
It was very interesting, and I've enjoyed and welcomed the opportunity to learn something about your country and the present situation, which I hope will turn to the better.